Now, we weren't aware of this being operational in the region, and we've become used to hear the explosions, the detonations, missiles, and artillery. But this had a whole new sound, and when we first heard this weapon firing off, we ducked for cover because it literally made this huge whoosh and went right over us, and we didn't know what it was. We did hear it impact, see it impact. So this is something the IDF really hopes can help it target precisely small groups.
And Nick, it's interesting that you're saying you can actually, by audio, hear that it's very different, that your actual physical reaction, your adrenaline reaction would be different. Obviously very significant because you've been standing there the whole time, and of course in Ukraine you hear artillery, are used to all of these sounds. Just some context here though, Phil. 320 strikes overnight. They said 205, I think, the day before yesterday. So I'm just putting it out here to make a point. That's more than 500 strikes in any given 48 period, and they've been running around that rate, right? Even the Palestinian Health Authority is not saying that there's anywhere near that many number of deaths a day. So it just, I'm making this point to make a use of the word precision. That they are incredibly precise, and in fact, it seems like in some cases they're actually targeted at operation command centers, not necessarily at individual Hamas operatives, right? But at structural or infrastructural points, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Aaron. We'll get back to you very, very soon. And with us now, editor and foreign affairs columnist at Bloomberg, Bobby Ghosh, and former foreign policy advisor to the Bush administration, Mitt Romney, and the co-author of a new book coming up, The Genius of Israel, Dan Synagogue, with us. Thank you, gentlemen, both for being here very much. I actually want to begin with what we heard from the King of Jordan, Dan, over the weekend. This is a U.S. ally, but he was emphatic, obviously choosing his words carefully and sending a message. Here he was.
The relentless bombing campaign underway in Gaza, as we speak, is cruel and unconscionable on every level. It is collective punishment of a besieged and helpless people. It is a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. It is a war crime.
You hear that, coupled with our reporting that the U.S. is urging Israel to pause, to wait, to try to allow more time to get hostages out. And the IDF says there is no ceasefire, there is no pause.
Yeah.
What is your read?
So I think there are two things going on. When you hear leaders in the region making those statements, I think they're very concerned about the Arab Street getting hot, particularly the King of Jordan, who's worried about real volatility in his own population in Jordan, and whether or not the tensions between Israel and Gaza, Israel and Hamas, could have, cascading effects for his own security and his own power. But most of the leaders in the Arab world are quietly saying, I hope Israel wipes out Hamas once and for all. So what they're saying publicly and what they're saying privately are two different things, particularly when you look into the Persian Gulf, the Sunni Gulf, they're hoping that Hamas is wiped out.
The question is the cost, right? I mean, we heard Queen Rania, his wife, who's Palestinian, really concerned as well about the treatment of the Palestinian people and all.
I think there are legitimate concerns about the Palestinian civilians. The question is who's responsible for that? Who can ultimately control their fate? Is it Israel or is it Hamas? The U.S. administration's agenda is different. I believe the Biden administration has mild hope that they're going to get out some of the hostages, particularly the hostages with American passports. We saw 2 released last week. I think Hamas is playing a very clever game where they're starting to dribble out hostages. I think you'll see more of that over the next few days. And so the Biden administration is saying, wait, if we're going to start getting out a couple of hostages here and there, every couple of days, there's a family I'm meeting with today. Hersh Goldberg Poland is a hostage who's here. I think he's been on CNN. And his parents are here today meeting at the UN Security Council. So a lot of these parents are organized as well they should be. And the Biden administration is saying, give it time. This puts Israel in a real conundrum because they can wait and they can wait and they can wait. At some point is the concern that will undermine their own future operation. And if all that's released at the end of it are hostages, except for those that are just Israeli passports.
Bobby, Dan gets at the complexity here, which as I've spent a lot of time trying to get my head around it, and while I'm certainly not a foreign affairs expert or foreign policy expert, I've covered a lot of this stuff for long enough to know that this is very different given how many cross-cutting variables they seem to be. You talk about the leaders in the region who might be saying something publicly for effect, saying something differently. So the U.S. wants hostages out, but is also moving in significant force posture increases for deterrence purposes, also potentially getting drawn into something bigger, while also trying to hug Israel and its leaders who they know are eventually going to launch a ground incursion. how does this all move forward in the weeks ahead, given what Dan is talking about, the hostages, where the Israelis are, a ground incursion, all these elements?
It moves forward very, very, very slowly until the ground offensive takes place, and then it moves very quickly. So that's the nature of these things. You know, things happen slowly until they suddenly happen very, very quickly. The triggering event now will be the ground invasion. Until then, there'll be all this diplomacy going around it. There'll be more, depending on how long this continues, the sort of, depending how much time Israel takes to launch the ground offensive. I imagine there'll be more gatherings of regional leaders. You know, Secretary Blinken will be on the road virtually all the time, trying to get herd all these cats together. There'll be a lot of negotiations behind the scenes involving the Qataris for those hostages, and there'll be lots of conversations between the White House and the Netanyahu
When you
office.
say triggering, I mean, my big question, what does triggering mean? What does it trigger? And that's obviously the big concern when you talk to U.S. officials.
Well, the calculation as to when the ground offensive begins will be made by the Israelis,
Right.
and they will consider all kinds of factors, including the pressure from the United States. But as Dan pointed out, they need to move in before too long. There's a time limit on how much they can wait. There is a momentum. We keep thinking of the pressure that's being put on Netanyahu from the outside. We're not paying enough attention to the pressure from within, from Israelis, and your correspondents on the ground will know this better than Aaron will know, and Nick, that Israelis want to see something done. We're now 2 weeks away from the horrific events that began this chain of utterances, and those events are still fresh in the minds of Israelis. They still want a reckoning for what happened on the 7th of October. They still want to make sure that that never happens again. There's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to follow through on his promises, to go in and finish Hamas once and for all. We can discuss around this table whether that's even possible, but we must not discount the strength of feeling in Israel and the impact that feeling has on Netanyahu's, on his disposition towards Gaza.
And to the point earlier about what leaders say in public and what they say behind closed doors, I think it's really interesting that CNN's reporting is now the Biden administration has pressed Israel to delay that ground invasion to try to get more hostages out. But it's not something we've heard publicly from the president, except for what his team says was a misunderstanding of him saying yes to a question over the weekend. Do you think there comes a point when that is something that the president says out loud?
No. I think the president's approach so far has been to give the Israeli government and the Israeli people a big bear hug in public, say, I have your back. I think what he did, as we talked about last week, was very dramatic by showing up in Israel, meeting with the war cabinet. So very forward leaning and sort of attach at the hip message publicly, and privately conveying these messages. I do not believe he will I don't know about ever, I can't say ever, but in the near term, I don't think he's going to pressure Israel. Because the deterrent effect that would wipe out if the U.S. government is publicly, in the president's voice, pressuring Israel, the message that would send to Hezbollah, the message it would send to Iran, would be disastrous.
Bobby, Dan, thanks guys, appreciate it. Well, as Israel fights back against Hamas, it needs more than just soldiers to win its war. One Israeli-American nurse says she can't just sit back and watch. She's going there to help save lives. She's also aware of the danger. CNN's Camille Bernal has the story.
This is the beginning of an uncertain and potentially dangerous journey. And a way of coping.
It reminded me how I felt on 9/11 when I was a child, and that hopelessness and not understanding what was going on. And I was like, never again. And this is really never again.
27-year-old Kinneret Levine is leaving everything behind. Her calling, volunteering her time as a medic in Israel.
I've made my peace with whatever happens. I've already made it because as an American, this is my sense of justice against terrorism, against my American values. As a Jewish person, my heart is bleeding. And as an Israeli, I'm ready to give my all.
Los Angeles was her last stop before her flight to Israel.
Are you ready to see that? I don't think anyone truly is ready or truly is prepared, but it's a conscious decision that I have made and I will stick through it.
The organization Bulletproof Israel helped place Levine at a hospital in Israel. They're working to help Americans who want to travel to Israel while also sending large quantities of supplies.
None of us are taking a salary. We're just doing everything we can to help our friends in Israel, to help our friends that have been victimized.
And they've been told the hospitals are in need.
We're seeing a lot of medical supplies that are necessary right now.
Levine hopes her time will make a difference.
This is doing my part, and this is my values and who I am as a person and who I am as a nurse and a medical professional.
She says as long as she's alive, she will be helping.
There is no regret. Regret is not the feeling. There is fear.
And she says she'll use that fear as motivation. She landed safely and told me I will come back home. Now, I also talked to a number of other organizations, including Yalla Indivisible. They help Palestinians in Gaza, and what they're telling me is that they can't help in a way that they want to. Sending someone there or sending supplies is not an option for them. They're trying to raise money, trying to get political attention. But overall, it's just Americans who feel like they have to do something, Phil.
All right, Camila Bernal, reporting. Thank you.
So negotiations between the actors union SAG-AFTRA, Hollywood Studios, are going to resume again tomorrow in yet another effort to end this crippling strike that began on July 14th. The two sides last met October 11th. The talks broke down after the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers said the gap was too great. Actors also returned to the picket lines last week amid union President Fran Drescher's calls for those negotiations to resume immediately. SAG-AFTRA wants wage increases, protections for using actor images through AI, more compensation for streaming programs, and improvements to health and retirement benefits. The Writers Guild ended its strike on September 27th. That one lasted about 5 months.
Well, the U.S. is sending more military assets to the Middle East, including missile defense systems, and putting American troops on prepared-to-deploy orders. Coming up, Republican presidential candidate Mike Pence joins us. We'll ask him about the U.S. response to Israel's war with Hamas. Stay with us.
Money This Morning is brought to you by Morgan Stanley, where old school hard work meets bold new thinking.
Morgan Stanley is partnering with the Women's Tennis Association to remove boundaries. Because this game is for everyone.
A white leaf filter? It's well designed, efficient. I appreciate that.
Leaf Filter's technology keeps debris out of your gutters for good. Guaranteed.
What more could you ask for?
Call 833 Leaf Filter today or visit leaffilter.com.
No matter who you are, there are times it can be tough to be yourself when you have severe asthma. Triggers can pop up out of nowhere and lead to an asthma attack. But no matter what type of severe asthma you have, Tespire can help you be you. Tespire is an add-on treatment for people 12 and over that can help you have fewer attacks, breathe better, and relieve your asthma symptoms. So you can be you, whoever you are. Tespire is not a rescue medication. Don't take Tespire if you're allergic to it. Allergic reactions may occur and can be serious. Rash or eye allergy can happen. Don't stop your asthma treatments unless your doctor tells you to. Tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection or your asthma worsens. Sore throat, joint, and back pain may occur. Avoid live vaccines. By helping control your asthma, Tespire can help you be you, no matter who you are. Ask your asthma specialist about Tespire today.
I'm hearing different ways for me to screen for colon cancer.
It's time to use my voice. I've got a choice. More than one answer.
I sat down with my doc. We had a talk. Knew just what to say.
I asked for Cologuard and did it my way.
Cologuard is a one-of-a-kind way to screen for colon cancer that's effective and non-invasive. It's for people 45 plus at average risk, not high risk. False positive and negative results may occur. Ask your provider for Cologuard.
I did it my way.
Israel has not only the right, as we've said, but the obligation to defend itself. We're not in the business of second-guessing what they're doing. We can give our best advice, our best judgment, again, about how they do it and also how best to achieve the results that they're seeking.
So that was Secretary of State Antony Blinken yesterday, trying to answer a question on whether the U.S. wants Israel to delay a ground assault until more hostages are freed. Not a direct answer there. Two sources, though, on the other hand, tell CNN the Biden administration is pressing Israel to do just that, to wait. A senior Israeli official tells CNN there will be, quote, no ceasefire, though, in Gaza. Joining us now to discuss that and a lot more, former Vice President of the United States, current Republican presidential candidate, Mike Pence. Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Poppy.
Let's begin with that, with our reporting from multiple sources to CNN that, yes, the Biden administration behind closed doors is urging Israel to wait, give an opportunity for more hostages to be released before launching a ground assault. Do you agree with that approach?
Well, I think all of our leaders from the president on down need to speak with one voice. That America stands with Israel, and we will stand with Israel to do what needs to be done, which is nothing less than crossing that border, hunting down and destroying Hamas once and for all. I mean, the reality is, after that horrific attack, the most brutal assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, Poppy, Israel has no choice but to destroy Hamas. And I believe that in public and in private, the President of the United States should be expressing nothing different than that. We've got to learn the lessons of history, Poppy, and the lessons of history are that peace comes through strength, and that when America withdraws, when America sounds a message of retreat, the world becomes more dangerous.
So just for clarity, are you saying you disagree with the Biden administration urging Israel to wait at all right now? You would not do that as president.
If I was president of the United States, I would make sure there was no daylight between us and the leadership in the state of Israel. We need to make it clear that we are there to support them, to stand beside them, to send a message to the wider region by the presence of American military force in the Eastern Mediterranean, two aircraft carrier battle groups, that if Hezbollah makes a move to make it a wider war, if Iran tries to make this a wider war, if Syrian forces or terrorists from Syria, that the United States is prepared to engage. We just need to give Israel room to do what needs to be done. I mean, the reality is that after October 7th, the world has come to realize, Israel knows, America knows, Hamas and Israel cannot coexist. Israel must prevail in that fight, and we must send them that message. And you know, this is a very momentous day too, Poppy, because 40 years ago today, 241 Marines were lost to a terrorist attack in Beirut. It was almost personal in our family. My brother was a Marine assigned in Beirut. His battalion shipped out 10 days before that attack. It was the worst single-day loss of Marines since Iwo Jima. And sadly, the Reagan administration made the decision after that terrorist attack to withdraw American forces. Osama bin Laden would write later that American retreat emboldened him to believe that violence against Americans could drive American forces out of the region. It literally set the stage for 9/11. We can't signal restraint. We can't signal retreat in this moment. We've got to make it clear that America stands with Israel, and we're going to stand strong for our interests in the region.
And there is a difference, an important one, between retreat and pause. And you bring up 9/11, and this, you know, has been referred to many times over as Israel's 9/11. I would love your reaction to what General Stanley McChrystal told our Jake Tapper. This was back in 2021, and Jake reminded us all of it on his show yesterday in terms of reflecting on what he wished America had done at that moment. Here he was.
I've thought about it a lot. Right after the 9/11 attacks, I would have made a decision inside the U.S. government to do nothing substantive for a year. And what I mean by nothing, no bombing, no strikes, etc. I would have gone around the world as the aggrieved party and built up a firm coalition for what ought we do about Al-Qaeda. I would have done a mass effort to train Americans in Arabic, Pashto, Urdu, Dari, to get ourselves ready to do something that we knew would be very, very difficult.
You were in Congress, of course, at that time, and you voted for authorization of the Iraq War. Looking back now, do you share some of his reflections that perhaps a pause, not a retreat, a pause by Israel in this moment in terms of a ground invasion would be prudent?
No, I think, quite honestly, I want to respect Israel's right to take time to do the early bombardment, to set military assets in place. But I find General McChrystal's comments to be incomprehensible. The idea that after September 11th, that we should have waited a year to respond. We made it clear to the Taliban in Afghanistan that they would give up al-Qaeda or we would come at them. We said you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And American forces hunted down and destroyed al-Qaeda. We displaced the Taliban, and for 20 years, up until Joe Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, it was American forces there, American forces around the world that kept us safe from another major terrorist event on our soil. So, no, I think we've got to stand strong. I think we've got to make it clear that there will be a price to be paid. I go back to that 40 years ago lesson, Poppy. It was 40 years ago today, 241 Marines, when we signaled American retreat. It was Osama bin Laden himself who would write, that emboldened him to set into motion the efforts that led to 9/11. We've got to meet this moment with American strength, and we've got to stand without qualification by Israel as they do what needs to be done to hunt down and destroy Hamas.
I want to move on to the hostages being held, but before I do, President Biden carrying out an agreement to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan that was made during the Trump-Pence term presidency. Look, you said yesterday, Mr. Vice President, that you think the U.S.
Well, but it wasn't carried out the way we were going to carry it out.
I want time to ask you about the hostages because you care a lot about this, Mr. Vice President.
Well, he changed the deal and it turned into a disastrous withdrawal, but we can talk about that again in the future.
And we will have you back, but you said and reiterated yesterday that you think the U.S. should send in special forces to free American hostages being held. This is what John Kirby from the White House said. This was October 12th about that.
Israelis have made it very clear that they don't want foreign troops on their soil, that they want to prosecute these operations on their own, and they have every right to want to do that. There is no intention, no plan, and frankly, no desire by the Israelis for U.S. combat troops to be involved in this conflict.
Despite that, if you were president, would you send in U.S. Special Forces, despite Israel reiterating to the White House that is not what they want, to try to bring hostages home?
Well, let me be clear, whatever we would do in conjunction with Israeli Defense Forces and also special forces in Israel. But look, we're talking about American hostages being held by bloodthirsty terrorists in Hamas. And if I was president of the United States, I would have directed American Special Operations, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, to stand up and to be prepared to go in. And then I would have made it very clear to Hamas, you either turn those American hostages loose and the Israeli hostages loose, or we're going to come and get them. We have the greatest hostage rescue teams in the world, and I think this business of waiting while Hamas decides the timetable, going hand in hand to Qatar to negotiate the release of hostages, we ought to just make it very, very clear that we are not going to tolerate them detaining American hostages. We don't ask permission to send American forces in to save Americans.
Right, but you were also saying that you would work hand in hand with the Israeli government and what they want. Finally, on this aid package put forward by the Biden administration, it's, as you know, $61 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel. You've got money for humanitarian aid, also bolstering the defense of Taiwan, and $14 billion for the U.S. border. I know you largely have been supportive of this, maybe quibble with some of the numbers, but there are a lot of Republicans in Congress who are not supportive of it, and I wonder what you say to them.
Well, I would say to them that following that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan by President Joe Biden, that cost the lives of 13 American service members and really weakened America's credibility on the world stage, and after 2 years of appeasement by the Biden administration, of Iran, that we've got to recognize that the weakness of this administration has emboldened the enemies of freedom around the world. Wars raging in Eastern Europe, and now war in the Middle East. We continue to see China menace in the Asia Pacific. We've got to meet this moment with American strength. We're the leader of the free world. We're the arsenal of democracy. I would tell my old colleagues, it's time. Let Congress work its will. Let them crunch the numbers. For heaven's sakes, let's get resources to secure the southern border of the United States as well. But this is the time for American leadership and American strength, and that's the pathway toward peace around the world and among our allies.
And those are all things included in this package proposed by the Biden administration. Come back soon, former Vice President Mike Pence. Thank you.
Thank you, Poppy.
CNN This Morning continues now. And it is the top of the hour. I'm Poppy Harlow with Phil Mattingly in New York. Aaron Burnett live in Tel Aviv overnight. Israeli forces ramping up airstrikes on Gaza, launching raids on the ground. The IDF says troops are gearing up for, quote, the next phase of the war with Hamas. And a senior Israeli official tells CNN there will be no ceasefire. This is new video this morning of the aftermath in Gaza City. Palestinian officials are claiming the intense bombardment has killed at least 436 people, including more than 180 children. The Israeli military says it struck hundreds of targets, including the underground tunnel network used by Hamas fighters.
And new this morning, Israel's president says one of the Hamas fighters killed during the attack on Israel more than 2 weeks ago was carrying instructions on how to build a chemical weapon with cyanide. CNN has not verified the claim. Let's go straight to Aaron Burnett live in Tel Aviv. Aaron, so much is moving right now, as has been the case for almost 2 weeks now. What's happening on the ground?
All right, well, on the ground, our Nick Robertson has reported, obviously, overnight. You could absolutely experience, he witnessed, and can verify an increase in the Israeli strikes, more than 300 of them, as you said. Also, we're finding out that Israel has made its first operational use of a new type of weapon. It's a precision munition. It's a mortar bomb that they have used for precision targeting, tunnel targeting. And we understand they've used about 10 of them over the past 17 days since this war began. And this new weapon, as our Nick Robertson was reporting, actually even sounds very different than what we're accustomed to hearing along front lines, like the one that has already started along the border with Gaza. So that's the latest that we understand now. But more than 300 targets overnight. Those were targeting command centers. Those were targeting individual Hamas operatives, of course, and also tunnels. And you know, the right now, I will say it's quiet. It is the middle of the day. It is the heat of the day. Not usually the loudest time. It is quiet today. The question is whether it will be the quiet before the next storm or not, Poppy.
What about what Israeli President Isaac Herzog has said, that they found, I believe, a USB drive on one of the Hamas militants that was killed in the attack that had some sort of instructions for a chemical attack using cyanide. What specifically was found? I know CNN hasn't independently verified it yet, but what does it tell us?
All right, so it's a USB, and on it they found a page from an Al-Qaeda operational manual back from 2003. Interesting, of course, the Israelis are making the argument that this shows that it is one continuum from Al-Qaeda to ISIS, now to Hamas. This is an operational manual with a page with a crude drawing of a cyanide distribution method for a chemical weapon from a 2003 manual. No evidence presented that there was any intent to actually use such a weapon by the Hamas operatives, but I will say, Phil and Poppy, reading through some of the documents that were found on these Hamas operatives, what they did have that they used was incredibly specific and accurate, detailed, and tested over time. Battle plans that they'd worked on for at least a full year, since October 2022, with plans to attack individual kibbutz along that border that were incredibly detailed. And they did follow those exactly to a T. Volunteer defenders in one of those kibbutz literally going through, reading it. It said, do this, and then this, and go to this street, and go to that. And they said that is exactly what they did. So some of the documents found on the Hamas operatives, they did follow to the T. Others, like this chemical weapons, may just have been something that was on a USB in someone's pocket. Unclear if it's any more than that, but Israelis are saying that they found that as well.
Aaron, thank you very much for the reporting. We'll get back to you very soon.
Well, as the Israeli war effort is escalating and a ground operation into Gaza seems imminent, there are conflicting stories this morning about whether the U.S. is calling for an actual delay. Two sources briefed on the discussions tell CNN that the Biden administration has pressed Israel to hold off its invasion of Gaza to allow for more time to release hostages held by Hamas and for more aid to reach Gaza. But a senior Israeli official denied the U.S. is seeking any delay, telling CNN, quote, "We deny this report. We have a close dialogue and consultations with the U.S. administration. The U.S. is not pressing Israel in regards to the ground operation." Here's how President Biden responded over the weekend.
Are you encouraging the Israelis to delay invasion?
Joining me now from the White House is National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby. Admiral, appreciate your time. My sense is there's some space in between, some gray area here to some degree, which is why I want to ask this question. Does the administration believe that once a ground incursion is launched, the window to get hostages released closes?
Look, I think not getting ahead of Israeli military operations and whether there will or will not be a ground incursion, it kind of depends on what they do and the manner in which it's executed. And since the beginning of this conflict, Phil, we've been talking to the our Israeli counterparts about their plans, their intentions, their strategy. We've been asking them for how they're answering the tough questions that any military is going to have to do before you go on and conduct major operations, and that's what we're doing now. I mean, but obviously, look, the Israeli Defense Forces, they make these decisions for themselves. They have to defend their own people on their sovereign soil, and of course they're going to have to make those decisions.
No, I understand that, but if the administration's interest in particular is with 10 Americans that are currently missing, a majority of which are expected or are believed to be hostages, do you believe that whenever the quote next phase, as the Israelis have framed it, of this operation commences, the window closes to get those Americans released through negotiations?
Again, I think it would depend on what operations we're talking about, how they execute them. I will tell you that nothing has changed about our focus on those hostages. We're glad we got two back home with their families where they belong. Last week, we want to get the rest of them out, and that you gotta have the ability to continue to negotiate and try to work towards that outcome. So we absolutely want to make that happen.
Admiral, I want to ask you something about the President, what he said on Air Force One. He was asked about discussions that have been happening. I'm not going to ask you about military operations, but take a listen to this.
We had a long talk about that and what alternatives there are. Our military is talking with our military about what the alternatives are, but I'm not going to go into that either.
What are the alternatives? Everybody's been talking I think, definitively about a ground incursion. There's an assumption there. It has not been confirmed. It is just an assumption. Clearly, there's been a buildup. What alternatives are there right now?
Anytime you conduct a military operation, you plan for what we call branches and sequels, different ways of executing that mission, and contingencies in case Plan A doesn't work and you got to go to Plan B. And what the President's talking about there is exactly what I've just been saying. Since the beginning, we've been in touch with our Israeli counterparts about their thinking, about their planning. And of course, we have a little experience at this too. And I think we've been willing to share some of that experience with the Israelis in terms of branches and sequels and thinking about the contingencies and what the backup plans might be. You would expect us to do that. We're very, very close friends.
The Secretary of Defense said this weekend there's a prospect of significant escalation. You guys have talked about the concerns about escalation, the efforts toward deterrence. There have obviously been shots back and forth between Iranian proxies. Has there been any sign that the type of escalation the administration has been concerned about has started?
Well, we have seen some worrisome attacks, and we got to do what we got to do to protect our troops on the ground, particularly in Iraq and Syria. You've seen us add additional military capability to the region. We are watching this very, very closely, so I don't want to get ahead of where we are, but right now, we don't see an indication that a major player is willing to escalate in a major way. That said, I don't want to diminish the kinds of attacks that we have seen in the last few days on our troops.
Admiral, I want to ask you something. We had a gentleman who's close friends with a couple who has a child that are currently near the Rafah crossing. They have been there for several days now. And we asked him about what Secretary Blinken said over the weekend. That was basically that Hamas has been blocking American citizens from crossing the Rafah crossing. We asked him about that statement. This is what he said.
And that statement by Secretary Blinken is one of two things. It's either not true or it's wordplay. So physically at the crossing, there are no militants. There are no military or government personnel at all on the Palestinian side. Abud sent me videos and pictures of him at the crossing, and literally the only thing between him and Egypt is a series of gates that are just closed. There just isn't an agreement right now about aid coming in and American citizens getting out.
Admiral, to that point, we talk a lot about the hostages. There are several hundred American citizens that are currently in Gaza.
Yeah.
To the point made by Sammy there, what is the disconnect right now? When will they be allowed out?
I wish I could tell you date certain, time certain. We want to get them out. We want to make sure that they have safe passage out, and we are working very, very hard, both with the Israelis and with the Egyptians, to get to that outcome. Right now, of course, you've seen some humanitarian assistance flow in, but we have not forgotten the plight of those hundreds of Americans that are on the other side of that Rafah crossing. We know they want to get home or get out, and we want to help them get out, and we are working on that very, very hard.
You've been working on that very, very hard for several days now. They have oftentimes gotten messages about specific windows when they could leave that fell apart. Is there any sense that working will end up with an outcome soon?
That's what we're working towards, Phil. I wish I could tell you for sure, but this is hard stuff. And if it was easy, they would have been out, on October 8th. But it's hard stuff to get done, and that's why our diplomats are on the ground. Ambassador Satterfield specifically appointed for this purpose, to get aid in and to get people out, Americans out. He's working on this literally every single hour of every single day. Again, I wish it was easy. I wish we could just flip a switch and have that gate open and all those folks get out, but that's just not the reality on the ground.
Understood. Last one before I let you go. In the president's primetime address, he talked about the aid he's seeking for Ukraine and how much of that aid is to basically refill American stockpiles. My question is the state of those stockpiles right now, the state of where U.S. weapons stockpiles stand, with two wars sending now two different types of shipments on a regular basis towards two U.S. allies. How big is the concern that the U.S. is dangerously low on what it should have for its own defense right now?
Well, of course it's a concern. That's why we asked for that extra supplemental funding from Congress. Without getting into classified information, I can assure you and the American people that the United States military can continue to defend our national security interests all around the world. But it's something that we watch very, very closely. And with every single aid package that goes to Ukraine and now Israel, the Department of Defense has to do an assessment to make sure that we can continue to meet our own war plans, our own operational needs. And we're doing that. We've also revitalized the defense industry to create, to manufacture and produce much more of these munitions so that we can, A, keep them going to Ukraine and Israel, but also, B, replenish those stocks. But it is important, and that's exactly why the president asked for that supplemental funding.
All right, Admiral John Kirby, the National Security Council. Appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
The humanitarian crisis is getting worse by the hour in Gaza. Officials are warning hospitals are overwhelmed. There's an acute shortage of food and fuel. Clarissa Ward takes a close look at the dire situation inside those hospitals.
We can't calculate our total taxes.
Sales tax, real estate credits, solar incentive.
And we have no way to integrate all that.
No, but BDO does.
People who know BDO. Some things are good to know, like where to find the cheapest gas in town and which supermarket gives you the most bang for your buck. Something else that's good to know? If you have Medicare and Medicaid, you may be able to get more health care benefits through a Humana Medicare Advantage dual-eligible special needs plan. Call now to see if there's a plan in your area and to see if you qualify. All of these plans include doctor, hospital, and prescription drug coverage in one convenient plan. From Humana, a company with over 60 years of experience in the healthcare industry. You'll have lots of doctors and specialists to choose from. And if you have Medicare and Medicaid, a Humana Medicare Advantage dual-eligible special needs plan can give you other important benefits. All of these plans include coverage for dental, with 2 free cleanings a year, plus fillings and a yearly exam. Vision, including eye exams and a yearly allowance for eyewear. And hearing benefits, including routine hearing exams and coverage for hearing aids, plus an allowance to help pay for essentials like eligible groceries, utilities, and rent, even over-the-counter items. And whatever you don't spend gets carried over to the next month. Best of all, you'll pay nothing for covered prescriptions all year long, even the brand name ones. And $0 for routine vaccines, including shingles, at in-network retail pharmacies. So if you have Medicare and Medicaid, call now to see if there's a plan in your area that could give you extra benefits, including coverage for prescription drugs, plus dental, vision, and hearing, and more. A knowledgeable licensed Humana sales agent will walk you through your options and, if you're eligible and there's a plan in your area, help you enroll over the phone. Call today, and we'll also send this free guide, Humana, a more human way to healthcare.
RSV can severely affect the lungs and lower airways.
But I'm protected with Arexvy.
Arexvy is a vaccine used to prevent lower respiratory disease from RSV in people 60 years and older. RSV can be serious for those over 60, including those with asthma, diabetes, COPD, and certain other conditions.
But I'm protected.
Arexvy is proven to be over 82% effective in preventing lower respiratory disease from RSV and over 94% effective in those with these health conditions. Arexvy does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients. Those with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. The most common side effects are injection site pain, fatigue, muscle pain, headache, and joint pain.
I chose Arexvy.
RSV, make it Arexvy.
Gaza's catastrophic humanitarian crisis deepening this morning, and some of the images that we are going to show you are disturbing. This is just a look at how dire the situation has become. Some parents in Gaza apparently are writing their children's names on their legs to help identify them if they are killed. It is just as hard to see what the children go through who do survive. This is a journalist in Gaza who was traveling to the scene of a strike. Here's what he said. Listen for yourself.
Heading to the place that got strike, and just people gave me these two babies. They are injured by the bombing. I just see them. They're fine.
A Gaza neonatal doctor warns that infants on ventilators won't survive if the electricity is interrupted. Doctors also say that yesterday was a bloody day. The Israeli airstrikes intensified. Israel said that themselves. Doctors say 166 bodies arrived at the hospital. Of course, none of these numbers are possible to verify independently. Meanwhile, they're forced to treat patients right now. They don't have morphine, so not even a painkiller for the surgeries that are desperately needed. Kids with burns are suffering with no painkillers. This is a healthcare system, obviously, that has completely collapsed. Doctors are toiling against the clock and against everything to try to keep people alive. Our Clarissa Ward is live in Cairo, Egypt with more. Clarissa, you were at the Rafah border crossing, where now there are a few trucks of aid going in, nothing like what is needed, but a few. But one of the things you were talking about explicitly was how fuel was not allowed, so that there would be water, there could be medicine, things like that, but no fuel, because Israel says that Hamas would siphon that off and take that for their own purposes. But Clarissa, what does this mean for hospitals who, when you run through your generator fuel, then you really don't have any backup electricity even to keep those ventilators or anything else going. So what do we even know about the dire nature of the fuel crisis for hospitals?
Well, I think you seized on the right word though, Erin. Dire. It's gone from critical to dire. Israel has turned off the electricity in the Gaza Strip. That means that all of these hospitals are dependent upon generators. Those generators are dependent on fuel, and fuel is not getting in. Israel has blocked it. They say it could be taken by Hamas. But as a result, you have this kind of diplomatic impasse. How to get that fuel in, how to satisfy Israel's concerns. So far, no one's been able to resolve it. We're talking about 34 trucks worth of aid that have gone through that border into Gaza in the last couple of days. Just to give you some perspective, Erin, in a normal 16-day period, more than 7,000 trucks full of aid would have gone through into Gaza. And now, this is all happening against the backdrop of relentless bombardment, many civilian casualties. We spoke to one doctor in the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza. Take a look what he had to say.
You are entering the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. This is just 1 minute on one day. But doctors tell us it could be any minute of the last 16 days. It is a scene from hell. Many of the patients are young children. The reception area, now a triage center. And everywhere you turn, another casualty. Every one of these people has been ordered by Israel's military to evacuate the hospital, including the staff, already outnumbered and overwhelmed. And as the punishing bombardment continues, the wounded keep flooding in. Doctors say there's nowhere else for them to go, and no safe way to transport them out.
We had the mass casualties once or twice a day, but now we have every half an hour casualties. So it is overloaded. Our emergency department and our OT department and our IBD department are overloaded with the patients.
Dr. Marwan Abu Sada warns that the situation is about to get dramatically worse. The hospital, he says, is just 2 days away from running out of fuel, needed to power the generators that are keeping the hospital and its patients alive.
If you do run out of fuel in 2 days, what will you do? I mean, what can you do?
I think the international community will be part of the process of killing of our people. If they don't act on Israel to allow to get this fuel into enter Gaza, what to do for the people who are in the ICU and mechanical ventilator? What about the neonates, the small babies? We have more than 130 in our neonatal ICU units. What to do with them? They will, I think we are allowing them to die in peace. This is the issue if we don't have a fuel to run our generators in the hospital.
Just a trickle of aid has been allowed to cross into Gaza, and none of it fuel. Blocked by Israel, it says over concerns it will be taken by Hamas. Hundreds of trucks are waiting along the Egyptian side of the border. Diplomatic efforts to establish a continuous humanitarian corridor have failed, and there is no more time for debate.
Now, Aaron, another important point to make is that the trickle of aid that has got into Gaza has not reached northern Gaza, has not reached that Al-Shifa hospital. Dr. Abu Sada said they haven't seen any of the medical supplies that have been going inside Gaza. This is just another problem, another obstacle to be overcome. And meanwhile, a lot of frustration, particularly in the Arab world, certainly here in Egypt from the government. They say they desperately want to make this happen, but there is just a complete standoff over this issue of the fuel. Obviously, Israel has been very vocal about its concerns about getting the fuel, but we are now firmly on the precipice of what is very clearly a life or death situation, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Israelis say there is now electricity in Gaza, but when we look at those shots in the night, it is incredibly dark. Poppy and Phil, back to you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. We'll get back to you soon. We want to bring in CNN Chief International Anchor Christiana Amanpour, who joins us live from London. There's the humanitarian crisis, Christiana, and then there's kind of the broader geopolitical on the verge of crisis, if not already there. You have so much experience in the region. The way regional actors are operating right now, how close is kind of that line that U.S. officials are very clearly concerned about right now?
So, guys, the internationals who support, Hamas, Hezbollah, all the rest of it, and the regional powers are looking at precisely that humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in Gaza as part of their publicly stated reasons for potentially getting involved. And just to add, the fuel means that there's no water either. Humanitarian organizations, the UN told me just last week that most Gazans have to rely on bottled water because they have salinated water naturally occurring, and without fuel, they cannot operate the desalination process. So it's about water too. I mean, this is the basic of survival, because people can live longer without food than without water. This is causing Hezbollah, Iran, the others to say, unless this quote-unquote war crime, this humanitarian catastrophe is not relieved, not to mention the massive deaths amongst civilians, including, according to Gaza Health Ministry, some 1,900 children, then in Iran's words, the situation risks spinning out of control. And you can see there has been more intensive, I'm going to say skirmishes now, but engagements on the northern Israeli border between Hamas and the IDF.
Christian, you have so much experience reporting on Hamas and its rise to power. I mean, especially in 2009, right after the Israel-Hamas war in December of 2008. Can you tell us a bit about that and how it informs where Hamas is now?
So yes, I started going, in the Hamas era in 2006 when they won that election that the U.S. had insisted on at that time. The administration of George W. Bush had insisted on an election, believing that their war in Iraq meant that democracy was going to, take over the Middle East via Baghdad. Well, it didn't happen, and despite what the Israeli government and what the Palestinian Authority said, that don't have these elections because Hamas will win in Gaza, they did go ahead and have the elections, and of course Hamas won. At that time, I went in 2006, and then again just after the last, the latest war, 2008-2009, Hamas was moving from having been mostly, according to the people, a social organization. It was becoming more and more militant, more and more involved in quote-unquote the resistance, and becoming very, very militant in that way. But what I did notice, and which I think is a cautionary tale, is I visited the homes of Palestinians in Gaza City and around that, always heavily bombarded North Gaza, and went to civilians' homes. There was a little boy who I always remember, Hamza, 5 years old, who his parents showed me what had happened to their house in the latest Israeli campaign. And this is a cautionary tale about what happens when people are constantly subjected to this kind of violence, and how they and where they put their faith and their politics, even as a kid, for the future. Just watch this a little bit, an excerpt. Since this latest round of war, teachers have noticed not just sadness, but anger. Hamza hits a boy with the ball that we've given him. When an adult tells him to share, he makes an extraordinary threat. He wants to bring in the Hamas militia. For him, they are the strongest authority. Oh my God. They tell me their home was hit by missiles, twice. It's so frightened their 90-year-old grandmother that she now spends her days sitting outside in the dust. Unprompted, Hamza launches into a tour of his devastated home, complete with sound effects. So you see what happens, and we spoke to a very respected psychologist at the time in Gaza who said they have no more faith in their parents, they can't defend them, they have no faith in society, not their teachers, just in what they're told is their defender, and that is Hamas in this case. And so these generations, and that was in 2009, he's nearly 20 now, young Hamza. Where is he today? This is a very cautionary tale, and you can see it even in U.S. Expeditions, whether it's in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. The tendency to radicalize people who have nowhere else to turn.
At such a young age as well. Christian, thank you. I'm so glad you brought us back to that moment. Well, sources tell CNN the United States is indeed pressuring Israel to delay its planned ground invasion of Gaza in hopes of getting more hostages out. The senior Israeli official tells CNN there will be, quote, no ceasefire in Gaza. We will be joined by a man who says 5 of his family members were taken by Hamas in the initial attack on October 7th.
The new CNN Prime Time is where the truth shines, taking you to the heart of the story.
We start with breaking news for you this evening. We are just about 3 miles from the Gaza border.
And breaking through the noise.
Interesting conversation about where we are in America right now.
The day's biggest stories.
What we have been seeing in Israel is unprecedented.
The night's most essential reporting.
It's not about what I believe, it's about whether there is evidence.
This is the new CNN Prime Time. Weeknights starting at 7 on CNN.
My most important kitchen tool? My brain. So I choose new Nariva Ultra. Unlike some others, it supports 7 brain health indicators, including mental alertness, from 1 serving to help keep me sharp. Try new Nariva Ultra. Think bigger.
This
is American infrastructure, megawatts of power, rails and open road, and essential services of every kind, all running on countless invisible networks, making it a prime target for cyber attacks. But the same AI-powered security that protects all of Google also defends the systems running America's infrastructure for these services, for the 336 million of us living here.
I was stuck. Unresolved depression symptoms were in my way. I needed more from my antidepressant. Vraylar helped give it a lift.
Adding Vraylar to an antidepressant is clinically proven to help relieve overall depression symptoms better than an antidepressant alone. And in Vraylar clinical studies, most saw no substantial impact on weight. Elderly dementia patients have increased risk of death or stroke, report unusual changes in behavior or suicidal thoughts. Antidepressants can increase these in children and young adults, report fever, stiff muscles, or confusion, as these may be life-threatening, or uncontrolled muscle movements, which may be permanent. High blood sugar, which can lead to coma or death, weight gain, and high cholesterol may occur. Movement dysfunction and restlessness are common side effects. Stomach and sleep issues, dizziness, increased appetite, and fatigue are also common. Side effects may not appear for several weeks.
I didn't have to change my treatment. I just gave it a lift.
Ask about Vraylar and learn how AbbVie can help you save.
What you're seeing today is a successful eye surgery. And this, the dedicated hours of virtual training that made it happen. Academic advancements are being achieved every day through collaborative hands-on learning. Upskilling careers, now made possible through immersive environments. These are the ways the metaverse is being used today.
Stop! I am a good zombie!
This October,
Trick or treat!
spirits come home to rest all month long.
This place is really haunted. What a weird mystery.
With Hollow Scream on Disney+.
We're gonna scare you. Boom.
Home is where the hunt is.
It's time.
They put food on our tables, care for our loved ones, and help build our communities. Canada needs over 400,000 migrant workers to fill employment gaps and sustain our growing economy. Mosaic BC's Migrant Workers Program provides support services to migrant workers, but more needs to be done. Like many others, migrant workers also lost their jobs during the BC wildfires. Emergency funding is required to support worker needs. Help give back to these workers who give so much to Canada. Donate today at mosaicbc.org.
I'm Paula Reed, and this is CNN.
Welcome back. Sources tell CNN the United States is pressing Israel to delay its planned invasion of Gaza in hopes of getting the hostages out. But a senior Israeli official says there will be, quote, no ceasefire. On Friday, Hamas released 2 American hostages being held, and there was hope more would be freed. That has not happened yet. Earlier this morning, a cousin of the freed Americans told ABC News the work has just begun.
We cannot put it aside. We cannot rest. This is getting Judith and Natalie back was not the end. It's the beginning. There are so many others. We don't know why them. So it's, for me, lucky and guilty.
Our next guest, Story Roberts, is one of those enduring this agonizing wait. He says he has been, quote, walking a thin line between madness and sanity, because 5 of his family members were taken by Hamas. 5. His aunt, who was later found dead along the Gaza border, her longtime partner, his cousin, and her 2 little daughters. New York Post putting the 2 girls recently on the front page. Roberts, who lives in Texas, says he thinks endlessly, what are they going through every minute of the day? And he had to discover the truth of what happened that day through a TikTok video. A TikTok video showing Hamas militants capturing his family members. Dory joins me now. Dory, good morning. I'm sorry it does not begin to express appropriately, but I am, and we are so sorry for your loss and your now angst and grief over what could be of your other family members. Can you talk about what you describe as walking that line between madness and sanity, what that's like?
Good morning, Poppy. Thank you so much for having me on your show this morning, and thank you for your amazing coverage so far. It's been over 2 weeks. There's no news about afterwards, we found out last week that my aunt had been pronounced dead and found along the border with the Gaza. I still have a half cousin who is in that community. We have not heard from him as well. He's still missing. His name is Ravi Katz. And it's been really challenging times for all of us, for family, for a nation, for Jewish people around the world. Just yesterday, I talked to my community in Los Angeles via Zoom, and we talked about all that grief and how challenging those times are for us as a nation. The fact that we're still looking for any kind of relief, any kind of news, are they well, are they not well, are they still alive? It is a day-to-day, it's an hour-by-hour struggle. It's not easy, not for me, not for my family, not for anybody out there to have a missing and kidnap people by the Hamas. We just don't know anything.
As you speak, we're showing pictures of your beautiful family, including those two beautiful little girls, 2 and 4 years old. I wonder how you balance the grief of the loss of your aunt, Efra Katz, and then perhaps a little bit of hope because there were 2 hostages that were released on Friday.
Right, yes, thank you, Bobby. We are definitely trying to keep the hope. Just yesterday we celebrate Doron, sister Lior. She was in many news outlets throughout these 2 weeks, and we celebrate her birthday. We're trying to keep them up. We're trying to wrap them up with love and show them that there is still hope. It's so hard. It is devastating every day to go through those motions. And we all parents, we all have partners and wives and husbands need to be taken care of. So walking that thin line between madness to hope is very real to us in a way. Every day, every part of the day is around us. We definitely can feel it, the heartache, the heavy-hearted to everybody, and try to hold into hope through the little things. Sending my kid just now to school, giving them a big hug, promise them that I will be there when they get out of school, and try to hang on to those daily things to remain humane, to remain sane for those times, to be in touch with my family, to be in touch with my communities here in Austin and around the U.S. While I do my mission and be here with the news and keep this story and their faces up and hoping for their release as soon as possible by the Hamas. And we are demanding that, and we are still help from other governments, from the administration to help us and bring them back home. Not everybody were as lucky as the 2 American hostages that were released. I'm very thankful that they are back in safety. We want the same for everybody else. We want that for our families, and we want that to everybody that is held by the Hamas, so we can stop this war right now and go back to recovery and go back to grief and mourning and bury our deads. The news keeps coming back. It's not good.
Tori, I wonder how you think about the new reporting that CNN has that the Biden administration is behind closed doors urging Israel to pause, to wait on a ground invasion of Gaza in the hopes that more hostages can come home. Is that something you hope to see?
I hope to see that, absolutely. I think this is a tremendous amount of effort from the administration, alongside with other players in the scene. I think our family are in intense and constant contact with the German government. This is 3 of them are actually dual citizenship with Germany, and we are in touch with them right now to do exactly the same, to apply the pressure, to influence the leadership of the Hamas to the immediate return. Hopefully, other country will join the effort, and we will be able to see results as soon as possible. And if that will bring an end to this war, the immediate release of all the hostages, absolutely. We do not want to see any more civilian, innocent people getting hurt on either side of the border.
Dory Roberts, thank you very, very much. If you hear anything, please let us know. We are all hoping for you.
Thank you so much, Poppy.
Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is supporting President Biden's call for Congress to bundle aid to Israel and Ukraine, but even if House Republicans agree, and that's a big if, they can't move forward without a speaker. They don't appear to be any closer to finding one. We'll have more on that next.
Nothing can prepare you for this kind of brutality.
None of us wanted this to happen.
They took babies after they killed their parents. It's something you can't imagine.
There's still bombardment ongoing inside Gaza.
Humanitarian conditions there grow more dire.
Are you hopeful still that Hezbollah will stay out of this war?
I'm Sarah Seidner in Tel Aviv with CNN's breaking news coverage of Israel at war.
Meet Martha. Martha is 75 years old and has been on Medicare for 10 years now. But she's a bit cranky because she heard the 2024 Medicare Advantage plans are now available during the Medicare annual enrollment period. And she wants details.
I'm already on Medicare. Why should I call and check up on my Medicare plan?
Hi, Martha. Plans and benefits can change each and every year. That's why it's important to call to get your free 2024 Medicare benefits checkup.
I already have my Medicare card. I am not calling.
Martha, right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. 2024 Medicare Advantage plans are now available, so everyone on Medicare can call to see if a Medicare Advantage plan may be better for you. You can even call to see if there are any changes to your current Medicare plan in the coming year.
They probably won't answer the phone.
Well, Martha, if you call 800-882-0987, a licensed insurance agent will speak with you and look up your plan options and see if there's a plan that will better fit your healthcare needs.
Why don't I get these automatically?
Martha, 2024 plans are now available, but you won't get a 2024 Medicare Advantage plan automatically.
I think I called before, so I'm not calling.
Martha, right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. 2024 plans are now available, so now's the time to call. So everyone on Medicare should call now during the Medicare annual enrollment period and get your free Medicare benefits checkup today. Just call the toll-free number on your screen. It's free.
Free?
Yes, Martha. The call and no obligation Medicare benefits checkup is free. They can look up your plan options.
Sorry for the moaning and groaning. Even though the diverticulitis I've been diagnosed with is, I believe, improving, I'm still in great agony and pain. Oh. Where it's at now, a song by Paul Beckman, Polyamble song. Also the new and first leader of humankind of the free world. Created October 23rd, 2023. Where it's at now, from what I've heard on CNN and BBC News, Israel wants to go on in with its incursion. The U.S. is saying, hey, how about some more humanity support? Help the Palestinians who are surviving in the Gaza Strip. Let aid get to them, food and water. But Israel doesn't want fuel going in because Hamas will use it and fire missiles at Israel, so it doesn't want fuel. But aid workers are saying, we gotta have fuel to make the plants go, make the plants function. For water, you know, and hospitals, they need it too. But Israel won't get fuel in because of Hamas using it for its weaponry. That's where it stands so far. I believe.
Speaking about Trump, here's what he allegedly said about a conversation Trump had with Iraq's president.
I hadn't even heard it. It hadn't even been on the news yet. He said, I just bombed Iraq today. And the president of Iraq called me up and said, you just leveled my city. And he said, and I said to him, okay, what are you going to do about it?
And he also recalled Trump sharing information about that infamous call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where Trump pressured Zelensky to launch an unfounded corruption probe of Joe Biden.
Trump said, you know, that Ukraine phone call, that was nothing compared to what I usually do. And he said, that Ukraine phone call, that's nothing compared to what we usually do.
Brad also offered some searing critiques of Trump's personal ethics, saying he, quote, says outrageous things nonstop.
Well, former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, urging House Republicans to finally select his successor.
This is not a time to play games. This is embarrassing for the Republican Party. It's embarrassing for the nation, and we need to look at one another and solve the problem.
Good news. They will get another chance this evening to try and solve the now nearly 3-week-long, embarrassing, Kevin McCarthy and many other people's words, not mine, issue that they're dealing with. Jim Jordan, he is out. This time around, they'll be looking at 9 Republicans who are vying for the gavel. This evening, those candidates are expected to make their pitches to their Republican colleagues in a candidate forum before an expected closed-door vote tomorrow. CNN congressional correspondent Lauren Fox joins us now, live from Capitol Hill. Lauren, I gotta be honest, I'm looking at this list of 9. I don't see anybody that gets 217. That's the number they're gonna need to become speaker. So where do we go from here?
Yeah, the rigmarole that's going to unfold over the next several days on Capitol Hill, a lot of viewers are probably very used to at this point, given the fact that it is the 3rd week without a House Speaker, and it is going to be their 3rd attempt in a closed-door room to try and get a Speaker designee who can get the votes that they need on the floor, that magic number of 217. What you can expect is that tonight there will be a candidate forum. It is the first opportunity for those 9 Republicans to make their pitch to their colleagues as to why they think that they should get the Speaker's gavel. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the voting begins. It will be behind closed doors first. This is an opportunity for Republicans to choose their Speaker designee. There have already been 2 times that they have chosen both Steve Scalise, then Jim Jordan in that closed-door room. After they emerged, though, neither one of those candidates were able to clinch the votes that they needed to become the actual Speaker. So the next 2 days are going to be this process to try to find that person. And while Representative